Right, well, here we are with the September virtual planetarium, and as ever, we will start with the inner solar system and the planet Mercury. Mercury's position in the evening sky is quite poor at the start of September. The planet is rather dim and sets quite quickly after sunset.
Yeah.
It comes to inferior conjunction, so that means it's between the Earth and the Sun on the 23rd of September. But after this, Mercury re-emerges into the morning sky, and then it'll become easier to see because Mercury is best observed in the evenings in springtime and in the morning sky in autumn,
Yes.
towards autumn time. So this will be a good one. This will be a good elongation to watch out for.
Yeah. And its neighbour, Venus, well, that's best seen at the beginning of the month, 30 minutes before sunrise, because Venus is gradually creeping back towards the sun. On the 1st of September, it shines at mag minus 3.8 and could be seen rising above the east-northeast horizon around 90 minutes before the sun. But it's not terribly well presented, I have to say, through a telescope at the moment, because it's about 10 arc seconds across and appears almost fully illuminated, and that's a consequence of the fact it's on the opposite side of its orbit from Earth, so it's about as far away as it can possibly get. Venus provides an excellent opportunity to spot an ultra-thin waning crescent moon at the limit of visibility on the morning of the 25th of September. That will be a 0.6% lit waning crescent, and it will appear 2 degrees from mag minus 3.8 Venus, the planet rising approximately 45 minutes before the sun. By the end of the month, Venus's position degrades further and it becomes harder to see, rising just 40 minutes before sunrise. So that's probably the end of the observing session, the morning observing session for Venus.
It is. In fact, the planet is at superior conjunction next month in October, so we'll discuss that. But after that, we're in for a good eastern elongation where Venus returns back to the evening skies.
Yeah,
and
that's
slowly
exciting.
It will become very well placed. Okay, moving out to the planet Mars. So as we've been building Mars up, haven't we, Pete, over the last few VPs?
Yes.
Yeah, we've been doing this because Mars reaches opposition on the 8th of December. It's going to be quite a good opposition for UK skies. It'll be fairly high up and reasonably large, so very, very good. It's currently showing some dramatic changes as it approaches opposition. In fact, on the 1st of September, it shines at magnitude minus 0.1 and is located just north of the Hyades open cluster in Taurus. And it's 9 arc seconds across in apparent diameter on the 1st of September, but by the end of September, it reaches 11 arc seconds.
That's a big increase, actually.
That's a massive increase. And in fact, I would think a 4-inch telescope would start to show surface details. Things like the Syrtis Major should certainly be visible in a smaller telescope with an 11 arc second apparent diameter disk. So
yeah, and
some very exciting changes.
Very exciting. And there's a 58% lit waning gibbous moon 3 degrees to the north of Mars on the morning of the 17th of September. But even more exciting, as we go through to the very end of the month, in the early hours of the morning, about just before 5 a.m. UT, 6 a.m. BST, it will be about just shy of 60 degrees up, which is pretty good.
Practically overhead. Practically.
We'll take that, yeah. 60 degrees is the new overhead.
60 degrees is the new zenith. Yeah, no, that's very good. That's given what we've had to contend with over the last few years. So, of course, the reason why we're also happy that Mars is higher up in the sky, planets that are higher up, they don't suffer the effects of poor seeing as they do when they're low down. And an extra little boost for Mars, it's red in colour. And
yes.
These longer wavelengths of light are less disturbed by the turbulence in the atmosphere than the shorter, bluer wavelengths. So
good point, yes.
Very, very good. Looking forward to that. On to Jupiter. So Jupiter, as we mentioned last month, it comes to opposition on the 26th of September and currently appears brightest and largest when viewed through the eyepiece during this particular period of observation.
Yeah.
Reaches quite an impressive magnitude minus 2.8 at around this time, and it moves from Cetus into Pisces throughout September. It's actually found near that faint, distinctive circlet asterism, but you won't need that to find Jupiter. Jupiter will be very obvious.
It stands out really well, doesn't it?
Yeah. You can perhaps use Jupiter to see the circlet asterism if you've never found it before.
Well, there's a bright full moon near to Jupiter. That'll be the moon at opposition itself, of course, on the opposite side of the sky to the Sun on the nights of the 10th and 11th of September. So that will be impressive to see such a big moon, or bright moon rather, very close to that bright planet. So they'll be about 3 degrees apart as they rise above the eastern horizon early evening on the 11th of September. Make a good photograph, actually, that.
Yes. On opposition night itself, Jupiter sits just 4 degrees east of the first point of Aries. Now, what is that? Well, this is a special place in the sky if you use the right ascension and declination coordinate system. It is where the celestial equator and the ecliptic cross, and the first point of Aries marks the position in right ascension of 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. In other words, it's the very start of that right ascension coordinate system.
It's the Greenwich meridian of the sky.
It's the Greenwich meridian of the sky, yes. It's very, very useful, actually. If you've never been sure about how to use right ascension declination, it is well worth your time investigating it and looking at how to do it, because it really does make things easier. If you know the hour angle, for example, if you go to any software, planetarium software, and click on any objects, usually it'll tell you the hour angle. And the reason that's useful is because the hour angle tells you how long you've got until that's on the north-south meridian, i.e. on your north-south line. So these are concepts that they seem quite abstract, are incredibly useful. And once you've mastered them, you can use them to find more obscure things in the night sky instead of having to star hop.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, back to Jupiter then. In addition to its detailed atmosphere, a small telescope will also reveal its 4 largest and brightest Jovian moons, the so-called Galilean moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede and Callisto. And the inner 3 can appear to pass in front of and behind the planet, although Jupiter's apparent tilt from Earth has now increased enough for Callisto to actually miss the disk. Over the last year, for example, it did interact with the disk, but the tilt has now grown enough so that Callisto, being the outermost moon, bigger orbital ellipse as we see it, it misses the planet. But its shadow can still clip Jupiter's southern pole, which is visible on the 5th of September between 0:30 and 1:47 BST. So that's something to look out for, actually. It's quite an unusual event, isn't it?
It is. In fact, Callisto and its shadow going across Jupiter is quite an unusual event, because Callisto actually takes quite a while to orbit Jupiter. Is it something like 16 days to do an orbit? Or
yes, around that, yeah.
And so that, combined with Jupiter being at a reasonable altitude during the nighttime sky, combined with the rarity of the event, means that it really doesn't happen that often.
No.
So, whenever one of these comes up, they're worth pursuing, because you never know. It might be quite a while until you get another one. I think I've only got a couple of drawings of Callisto or Callisto's shadow on Jupiter in transit. So I should look out for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go out to Saturn now then. So following opposition on the 14th of August, so it was opposition last month, Saturn remains really well suited for observation throughout September. It does drop in brightness, but only by a tiny amount. So that's a good thing to look out for as well. There's a bright waxing gibbous moon near to Saturn on the nights of the 7th, 8th and 8th, 9th of September. Further out, Uranus, well, morning planet Uranus is perfectly placed for UK observation, able to reach an altitude of around 50 degrees under dark skies. Through a telescope, it appears as a tiny green-hued disk. It's about magnitude plus 5.7, which means that it's right on the edge of naked eye visibility from a dark sky sight. But this month is really exciting because there's a rare lunar occultation of it, which will take place on the 14th of September. We'll come on to that in a moment.
And the last planet out, the planet Neptune, this reaches opposition on the 16th of September, but it's such a long way from the Earth. This has very little effect on the visual appearance of Neptune. It'll reach an altitude of around 30 degrees under dark skies all month, so that's pretty good. You'll need at least binoculars to be able to see it because it's magnitude 7.8, so well below naked eye threshold, so you will need optical aid to see it. In a telescope, it's quite obvious because it stands out as a little blue disc, so it's quite easy to see once you've got hold of it.
And Jupiter's actually creeping closer to it, isn't it? The two planets are separated by just under 10 degrees at the end of the month, so that's of interest as well. So let's now move out from the planets, or move on from the planets, I should say, and we'll have a look at some of the special events which are happening in September. On the 5th, we've got a view of that lovely clair-obscur effect known as the jeweled handle, and that's where the lunar dawn light catches the peaks of the Jura Mountains, which is that curved semicircular mountain range around the edge of Sinus Iridum, the Bay of Rainbows. And that's a nice thing to look out for, because you can see that with binoculars. With a small telescope will pick it up as well.
Yes, and on the morning of the 7th, magnitude minus 0.2 Mars lies just 4.3 degrees from magnitude 0.8 Aldebaran.
Well, that's interesting.
Yes, so it's in the morning sky. Both objects have quite a distinctive orange hue. Mars is obviously a bit brighter, so its colour might be a bit more perceptible than Aldebaran. I find Aldebaran to be quite a light orange colour, not too dissimilar from Arcturus, whereas Mars is more of a salmon pink to me. So be interesting to compare the colours on that morning.
Yeah, okay. On the 8th, we've got minor planet 3 Juno, which reaches opposition, shining at magnitude plus 7.8 in the constellation of Aquarius, approximately 10 degrees to the west of Neptune, which is also of similar brightness. So there's two solar system objects there to look out for. On the 10th, the moon is full at 10:59 BST, 09:59 UT, but won't be visible until later in the day. And that full moon is closest to the September equinox, which means it is...
Harvest moon.
It is the harvest moon, yes.
It's the harvest moon, yeah. I'd be interesting to see if somebody gives it an alternative name, because I don't know if you've seen this, Pete, but often you get spammed with these lists on various social media sites of it's the strawberry moon this month, it's the cow moon this month. You think, well, none of this has any bearing on any of the original names. It's there's always seems to be a new one for each month, each year, I find.
That's right. Well, the harvest moon, of course, is defined because it's defined as the closest full moon to the September equinox. So the other moons are given because of the month they're in, but the moon doesn't follow the month, the calendar month divisions, and sometimes you could have two full moons in a month, and that just makes things awkward for these sort of random names. That's where the blue moon creeps in, where they're given the extra moon in a month the term blue moon, but actually that doesn't fit the original definition of a blue moon, because the blue moon was supposed to be an extra full moon in a season. So it's all a bit of a mess, really, but the harvest moon is a properly named moon, and it's so named because at this time of year, when the moon rises, when the fuller phases of the moon rise, if you compare the rise time from one evening to the next, it's a minimum for the year.
Right.
The maximum occurs in the spring, in March, when I think you can go to about 85, 90 minutes between the rise time, whereas in the autumn it goes down to about 20 minutes, I think, as the absolute minimum. The average difference in rise time is about 50 minutes. So that means that in the September period, when the moon is the brighter or larger phases of the moon, I should say, are coming up, they appear more or less the same time of the evening, and the idea is that they're there to illuminate the fields for harvest collection.
There you go. More than you ever wanted to know about the harvest moon, I suspect. Okay, on the 11th, just after rising in the evening, the 97% lit waning gibbous moon will be just 3.8 degrees from Jupiter, which is magnitude minus 2.8.
Yeah, we mentioned that before, but that is really worth emphasising because it will be quite a bright event and will stand out really well. And then on the 14th, we get that wonderful event, which is a precursor to there's another one of these happening later on in the year, and an occultation of Mars as well. So on the 14th of September, it's a lunar occultation of the planet Uranus. And so what's going to happen is that at 22:30 BST, 21:30 UT, the bright limb of a 77% lit waning gibbous moon will cover the tiny 3 arcsecond Uranian disk. And the planet will re-emerge into view at 23:21 BST or 22:21 UT from behind the moon's dark limb. Those times, by the way, are good for the centre of the UK, and they might vary by a few minutes depending where you live. But you can find more information in the magazine. But that is quite an event. I don't think I've actually seen a lunar occultation of Uranus before.
No, me neither, actually. I think I've seen one of Saturn.
Yeah, I've seen Saturn.
I think I've seen one of Jupiter. I've not seen one of any other planets, and I've certainly never seen one of Uranus. So that will be quite an exciting one to look out for.
I've seen Venus actually. That was quite interesting because Venus is much brighter than the moon.
Yeah.
And you think, well, the moon's in the sky, the moon will outshine Venus, but it's the surface. When you compare the surface of the moon to Venus close to it, you realise that the surface brightness is completely different. Venus is really, really bright in comparison to the much dimmer moon.
So that'll be a nice one to look out for. We've got many, many good events this month, actually.
Yes.
On the 16th, Neptune reaches opposition in Aquarius. We've mentioned this. So it's currently 6 degrees south of the circlet asterism in Pisces. On the 17th, a 58% lit waning gibbous moon is just 2.9 degrees north of Mars, which is at magnitude minus 0.4 in the morning. You can catch that after 0100 BST or midnight UT. And then on the 23rd, the Sun crosses the celestial equator heading south. So this is marking the September equinox, also known as the Northern Hemisphere's autumn equinox, of course, the Southern Hemisphere's spring equinox.
Yes.
And that occurs at 0204 BST on the 23rd.
On the 24th, Io and its shadow will be transiting the planet Jupiter, and because it's very close to opposition, they will appear really close together. So that's something to look out for. And also on the 25th, Io and its shadow again will transit Jupiter. You can find details of these, by the way, in the magazine. So at opposition, the moon will virtually line up with its shadow on the disk.
And on the 28th, this is another fairly rare one, giant moon Ganymede transits Jupiter along with its shadow from 0506 BST, 0406 UT. The event will still be in progress as Jupiter sets. It'll be quite a tough one to get, but if you can, I think it'd be worthwhile.
Yes, it will. Well, there's lots to look out for there, but what about the stars? Well, we're starting to see the stars of autumn coming back in force this month. The charge led by the magnificent flying horse Pegasus, which isn't actually the most dramatic constellation, is it?
No,
really?
I don't mind confessing for a number of years, well, no, it wasn't a number of years, when I first started out in astronomy, for a month or so, I thought Cepheus was the square of Pegasus. I got a bit confused because on star maps and on planispheres, it looks smaller and brighter, more important than it actually is. When you see it in the night sky, it's actually quite a large featureless region, isn't it? Apart from the square there, it's very difficult to see. It's a void, yeah.
It's a void, that's right. And it's, it sounds ridiculous to say you'd mistake Cepheus for Pegasus, but actually it's a very important observation, that, because you have to remember that people that don't know what the star patterns look like can easily be fooled by this. For seasoned astronomers who've been doing it for years and years and years, it's blindingly obvious where Pegasus is. But if you're not sure, it is easy to get confused.
It is, and it was only when I finally figured. I think what I did was I located Cassiopeia retraced the steps and thought, oh no, that's completely the wrong direction. And then from Cassiopeia, I found Pegasus. So, but yeah, it is because Cepheus is a small, bright, small, square in the same way that Pegasus is.
It's a bit like a child's drawing of a house,
Yeah,
isn't it, Cepheus? It's got a square at the bottom and then a triangular roof. In fact, I think there's a star right in the middle of the square, so it looks like the number 5 on a dice.
Yes, I think it's quite faint, so you need to ask guys to see it. If you're looking from the UK, at Pegasus, you look at the top left-hand corner, the star that marks the top left-hand corner. This officially isn't a part of Pegasus at all. This is the star Alpheratz, which is the Alpha star, Alpha Andromedae, so the main star of Andromeda. But that has never made any sense to me. How can you have a square of Pegasus with only 3 points? It's
I think it's an official move from Pegasus, because it did used to be part of Pegasus, didn't it?
I think so, yeah. The IAU changed.
Which one was it? It was Delta.
I can't remember what it was, but it was part of Pegasus and now isn't. So that it's not really that asterism, the square of Pegasus, isn't really that anymore, is it? It's
the Great Triangle of Pegasus.
Yeah. Or the Great Polygon, maybe the Great Polygon of Pegasus.
A regular polygon of Pegasus.
Because it's not...
That's sort of losing a bit in translation.
It is. It doesn't make it sound... But it does make it true. It's not an equilateral triangle, or it's not a proper square. So, but anyway, yes, it's the square of Pegasus, but we know that the top left-hand star is really a part of...
I was really surprised, actually, when I went to the Southern Hemisphere and I looked at the Great Square of Pegasus, because it's upside down from there, because the Earth isn't flat. When you look at it,
how dare you make such an outrageous claim on this this podcast? I suspect that's not news to any of our observers, any of our listeners.
No, but I never understand actually with people who do promote flat Earth or the flat Earth theory. Why they don't actually just buy themselves a telescope and go and observe stuff and work things out for themselves, rather than being told by other flat earthers that the Earth is flat. Surely that's promoting the conspiracy that the Earth is flat. Well, anyway, I'm digressing there.
I think you should come quite quickly back to astronomy.
Okay. Well,
yes, it is upside down. It is from the Southern Hemisphere.
It's upside down, but it really doesn't look like a square, because its sides are not equal, and it looks really distorted and quite odd. You'd think it would just be like an upside down square in the sky, but it doesn't. It looks really quite an odd shape.
I've never seen it from down south, actually.
Yeah, it's worth looking out for if you have an opportunity to see that. It is quite striking, actually. But the giant... Well, let's go to another geometric pattern. We've got the giant summer triangle asterism, which remains reasonably high in the southwest at the moment. In fact, the summer triangle lasts virtually all year, doesn't it? It's formed by Vega, Deneb and Altair, the brightest stars of the constellation Lyra, the lyre, Cygnus the swan, and Aquila, the eagle. And if you have good dark skies, look out for the Milky Way, which passes down through the cross-shaped body of Cygnus and on into Aquila. And that's the light from the billions of stars in our own galaxy, too far away to be seen individually. But if you're looking south in the hours before midnight, that will put you in a direction of the sky which is informally known as the sea, because it has a lot of water-based constellations, which we have mentioned in previous years, but it's worth having a quick go over them again, isn't it? So let's start with that triangular constellation of Capricornus, the sea goat.
Yes, this is an odd constellation. It does look like, what is it you call it normally, like a squashed sandwich, because it does look a little bit like...
It does look like a sandwich. I saw somebody again from the Southern Hemisphere, where it would be up the other way. They were describing it as shaped like the roof of a house.
Oh, yeah, yes, because it would be, the triangle would be upside down then. So, yeah.
Yes.
And it's one of the oldest known constellations. Apparently, depictions go back of this constellation as far back as the Middle Bronze Age, and explicitly depicted in ancient Babylonian star catalogues produced around 1000 BC. So, very old constellation. It's not surprising. I imagine the further south you go, then the more prominent it becomes. And it is quite a distinctive shape, this triangle in the night sky. The
It's-
constellation, sorry, go on.
Well, I was going to say, it's supposed to represent a sea goat, isn't it?
Yes, whatever a sea goat might be.
Well, they obviously had a lot of sea goats back then. Actually, I think the basis of this is supposed to represent the god Pan, who was represented as a goat, and he was under threat from a. I can't remember what the creature is called. Is it typhoon? Which is it's a mythical serpent that could cause even the gods harm, and he was startled by it and went to dive into the sea, and so transformed himself into a fish. But he was only half transformed when he actually went in the sea, which is why he's a sea goat, because he's got part of him is a goat and the other part is a fish.
Well, fancy that. Okay, so now we know the mythology. The constellation is best recognised by virtue of the two pairs of middle brightness stars in the eastern and western extremities. Actually, that's true. That's the bit you noticed
It is,
first,
yes.
isn't it? And then the rest of the triangle sort of filters in. Further west is the star Alpha Capricorni. If you look at this star with keen eyesight, if you have that, you should be able to spot that it's actually a fairly matched, close, naked eye double. The components of the two stars have magnitudes 3.6 and 4.2, and are separated by about 6 arc minutes.
Yeah.
Although they're not actually gravitationally bound, are they? They're an optical double.
No, they're not. It's just an optical double. Well, a little further to the south of Alpha lies Beta Capricorni, which is a tighter double comprising a mag plus 3.4 primary and 6.2 secondary, separated by just 2 arc minutes, so about a third of the separation of the Alpha pair. And that pair is best seen with binoculars or by using a small telescope. And unlike Alpha, Beta is a true binary star. The stars are in mutual gravitational orbit around one another, separated in space by about 1 trillion miles.
So a little bit of a contrast to the optical double we had before. Hidden away in the southeastern corner of this constellation is a somewhat infamous globular cluster called M30, around about 7th magnitude. This is a problem Messier had. It messes up the Messier marathon attempt.
Yes, it does in March. Yeah.
It's quite, because it's so low down and in a very summer-orientated constellation. It's quite a difficult one to get. All the other objects in Charles Messier's catalogue,
You can just about do it.
just
all
about
in
do
one
it
night.
in early spring,
Yeah.
but not M30. So
No.
fly in the ointment there if you're trying to get the Messier marathon done in springtime from the UK.
Well, above Capricornus, we keep the watery theme by entering the constellation of Aquarius, the water bearer, which is a tricky to navigate constellation, it has to be said, because it's a bit sprawling and it doesn't have any really good structures, apart from one, which is known as the water jar asterism, and that's formed by the stars Gamma, Zeta, Eta and Pi Aquarii. A more modern name for that, a more contemporary title for it rather, is the distinctive pattern that forms what's known as the steering wheel because it has 320 degree space spokes. I think these contemporary names come about mostly from meteor observers because they spend a lot of time just looking at the sky, and in between the periods of meteor activity they probably get a little bit bored and they can see these shapes and they use them to define their way around the sky, because we often talk about asterisms and things, and you know they can be seen as a rather flippant way of describing the night sky, but they are actually important because they are ways of helping people navigate what is otherwise just a myriad of dots all over the place.
Yeah, I thought actually most of these asterisms came from you, but maybe they do have other origins as well. It is a good one, the steering wheel, because it does. I don't drive, and to me it looks like a steering wheel. So
thank goodness for that.
Thank heavens. Well, that I don't drive, or that I agree it looks like a steering wheel.
You don't drive.
I made an agreement with Patrick Moore I'd never learn. So even though he's gone now, I think it's still an agreement that has to stay. So
Absolutely.
all right. Well, despite this sprawling faintness and the fact that Aquarius doesn't really contain a lot of objects, there are a few things in it worth finding. A couple of deep sky objects, in particular, NGC 7009, the Saturn Nebula.
Oh, yes.
So called because it resembles a tiny version of Saturn through the eyepiece. I have to say, though, whenever I've looked at it, it's just been a very faint misty patch because it has quite a low surface brightness. We also have, this is quite a good object, the Helix Nebula, NGC 7293.
That's toughy, though. That is tough visually.
It's kind of like a large, spread out version of M57, the Ring Nebula in Lyra. It's the same sort of thing, a planetary nebula, a star that's come to the end of its life and sheds.
It's one of the closest to us, isn't it?
It is. So even though it's one of the closest to us, it's actually very, very difficult to make out. But it's nice to say you've seen it. It's quite large as well.
Well, that's why it's difficult to see, because it's about a quarter of a degree in diameter, so its light is spread over a large area, and that's why it's difficult to see visually. I suppose we better wrap up soon, but before we do that, let's mention about the little constellation of Piscis Austrinus, the southern fish, which has the first magnitude star Fomalhaut, or Fomalhaut, however you want to say it, and that's the most southerly first magnitude star which is visible from the UK. And if you're not sure how to find it, simply extend the western or right-hand stars of the square of Pegasus down towards the horizon, and they point directly at Fomalhaut. If you can't see it, it's probably behind something.
Yeah, anything. An anthill, trees. It's so low.
A blade of grass.
A blade of grass. It is actually quite a bluish colour star, though, so I do find that helps give it away. But quite a tricky object to see. But if you've got access to flat, open space and dark skies, we don't need the dark skies so much, but just a wide open space with no obstructions on the horizon. That's a good one to go for.
Yes, it
is. So plenty to see in the September night sky. I wish everyone clear skies. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Paul.